this is where this project began for me. This is Stanford Business School where I went, and one of the things that I heard people say that was sort of the seed for this book was that they would do something new or they would do something entrepreneurial if they just had a great idea. Now, we've just seen comedians don't start with great ideas. Seinfeld's got, you know, these sheets of paper that he scribbles ideas down on. They don't know what's going to work and what's not, so they have to go into these small clubs to try it. And this was very similar to the way I saw entrepreneurs work when I was in venture capital before going to business school. And so Beethoven would have to slave over his transcripts night after night after night. He would even see on the transcripts the pen quill had poked through the paper where he'd just been toiling over it. And you know, this is a draft of one of his manuscripts. So if the reality is that most creators and innovators work this way, then the question is, well, how do they do it? Like, what's their basic approach? And so that's what I ended up researching for the next couple of years. And one of the things that you find is that if this is the way creativity works, if this is the way innovation often works, why is it so hard for us? And one of the key first things you realize is that we're taught from a young age to not make mistakes, to have correct answers, to not make errors, right? I mean, that's pretty much the experience in this room, right? Like mine, would you say? So you don't make mistakes, you don't make errors, you get rewarded for perfection. That's the goal, good grade. When in reality, when you want to do something creative, it's just the opposite. So when you look at the research that compares how managers think about doing something new with the way entrepreneurs think about doing something new, the entrepreneurs don't think about expected gains. The entrepreneurs, when they're doing something new, think about what they can afford to lose. When we get trained in management, or we get trained in analytical thinking, we get trained to think in terms of what we can expect to gain by doing something, right? So think about it in terms of, like, if you're going to go after a new product area, is it common to think through, I mean, this is what we're taught in management thinking, what's going to be the end result? It's going to be a $100 million project, right? Let's just say. This is how every company thinks, as you're saying. This is how every company thinks. This is a slide that's an actual slide from the US Army. And it's depicting the strategy for Afghanistan in 2010. And it was prepared by the staff to General Stanley McChrystal, who was then heading up the effort for the Army in Afghanistan. So his staff brings him this slide, PowerPoint slide, and says he gets it. And McChrystal's response is, when we understand that slide, we will have won the war. Which is just perfect, right? It's just perfect. Because this is exactly what happens. We think that we can put everything into a PowerPoint because this is the way we've been trained. And the reality is, when the Army moved from the Cold War era to Middle Eastern counterinsurgency warfare, they get into new towns, and they don't even know what the problems are going to be when they get there. So there's a lot of really interesting neuroscience research that shows the difference between people who are playing structured music and improvised music. So what they'll do is they'll put these people with a keyboard into an MRI machine, and they'll say, okay, play a classical song. And the person will play a classical song, and they'll measure their brain waves. And of course, they really, just to be honest, they really don't know what they're seeing here with this stuff yet, but they see something is different when they put the person in and they're improvising. They're improvising. What they do know is this, is that the front part of their brain, the frontal cortex, part of the frontal lobe, has a part that gets deactivated. And so this is the part of the brain that's believed to be responsible for judging and censoring, and there's an artistic side of, like, self-expression that gets deactivated when people are improvising. This is Tina Fey, who, as many of you know, has come out with this pretty great book where she talks about improv pretty openly. And so the way she talks about improv is she'll say, okay, let's say, what's your name? Nancy. So, Nancy, I'm pointing a gun at you. What do you say?
Put the gun away.
Put the gun away. That's good. Okay, we're cool. So but that's it. You've just done you've done improv. That's exactly what it is. Now, if you'd said, if I took my gun and you said that's not a gun, then you would have killed it. That's the example Tina Fey usually uses. So improv relies on two basic principles, and it's what they call around Pixar. They call it plussing. And the two basic principles are: if I have an idea that I give to you, you accept the offer, and then you plus it. You say, you make it better. You make me look good. You make your partner look good. So the point is you don't use judgmental language. You don't say, that's a stupid idea, Peter. What are you doing holding your finger out as a gun? Right? Because that kills any type of creative vibe. And so This is literally, I think this is the part of the secret sauce of Pixar that anybody can do. And that is just to use these simple principles from improv, whether it's with your team or with your just another colleague, to say, okay, instead of using judgmental language like but, use yes and then when you take somebody's idea, instead of saying, I don't like it, you say, what if we did this? Now again, just at the early stages of developing ideas, the neuroscience research shows, the experience Pixar shows, that this is a very effective way to develop and build up ideas. So that's something I think anybody could be able to do. And it counters what is a very common phenomenon called the hippo phenomenon, which is very common across all companies and all industries, which is that the highest paid person's opinion is the one that matters most. Right? So this is, yeah, across any, it's everywhere. This is relevant everywhere. This is the nature of organizations. And so, but the reality is that the insights and the creativity is going to exist all throughout the organization. And it's a challenge for everyone. It's a challenge for all of us. And there's, again, a lot of research out there that shows that you can create your own luck. This is Dr. Richard Weissman. He's in the UK, and he's studied for years how people are either lucky or unlucky. And what he's found is this, is that about 30%, 30 to 35% of people think of themselves as chronically unlucky. Just nothing goes well for them, right? We all know, maybe, no? And then about 50% of the people consider themselves to be lucky. And then there's a group in between that's sort of ambivalent about that. But this is how Weissman then does his experiment to try to understand what's the difference between lucky people and unlucky people. So what he does is he gives people a newspaper. And he says, count the number of pictures in this newspaper. And on the second page, there's this ad that's a half page on the second page. Stop counting. There are 43 photographs in this newspaper. And it's big. It's like this, you can't miss it if you're just paying attention. And what he found is that the lucky people caught it and the unlucky people missed it. So, and farther in, about halfway through the paper, there's another half-page ad. Stop counting. Tell the experimenter you've seen this and win 250 pounds. And the unlucky people still miss it. Because why? Because they're looking for a very specific thing. They're looking for a photo. The best way to predict the future is to invent it. And so I hope that each of you in your own way can make some little bets and invent your future. And invent